Hello, hello. Welcome to this first video of the Harmonist, where we're gonna add an interesting, I can't say new because it's actually ancient, but we're gonna add an interesting spin that many people probably hadn't thought of or heard of before on whatever strikes our fancy to do so. And today we're doing that with a topic that came up in a debate between Tim Pool and Andrew Wilson. For those of you who don't know, Tim Pool and Andrew Wilson are uh, popular. Well, I guess Tim Pool is a podcaster. Andrew Wilson is a YouTube. He calls himself a blood sports debater. Um, anyway, they started to debate the nature of God, and I don't want to start laying it out. We're going to watch it. So let's just watch it, talk about it as we go through it, and then I'll add the speciality that I'm hoping will be new and interesting for the viewers out there. All right, so this is kind of happening in the middle. I'll link the original video here, which is actually a shortened version of a much longer debate, which you could find elsewhere relatively easily. Um, and we're hopping in right after they discuss the nature of rights, whether or not rights are given by God. And since that's not really relevant to what I want to talk about today, I won't say any more about that, but I just want to let you know that this is happening kind of in the middle of another conversation.
God's nature can't be contrary. You agree with that, right?
Elaborate what you mean by that.
So God,
Can't
God
contradict himself?
yeah, he can't make a God more powerful than him.
I disagree with it.
What?
I so you're talking about, good God created a stone so heavy he himself cannot
Yeah.
lift it. God can do anything.
All right, so here we see Andrew's trying to establish some groundwork here and saying that there are some things that need to remain consistent, logically speaking. God is defined as being all powerful, so Andrew says he therefore could not make a God more powerful than himself because now is God all powerful? No, he's not. There's something with more power than him, which means power that he does not have, so he does not have all power, right? And therefore, God could not do this because he would no longer be God. And Tim Pool is saying, well, hold on. We can't say God cannot do anything at all because who are we to say what God can and cannot do? God is also infinite and unlimited, right? So let's see where this goes from here.
That's incoherent.
It's not. Logic only exists within the confines of God's
No.
word. God's word is beyond your
No,
comprehension.
logic is
So-
is a transcendental category, and since it's a transcendental category, we know it exists even though it's not physical. But all things bind by it. Part of God's nature has
Is Jesus
to.
God?
Yes.
Would Jesus be able to lift a 5-ton boulder?
Yeah.
Then
There's no contradiction there.
so
So what Andrew's asserting, which I think is their point of contention, is that logic is not just another material law that God can just violate because he's all powerful and unlimited. Logic is actually an aspect of God's own nature. It is transcendental. That's why we can't put our fingers on it, right? Let's see where this goes from here.
certainly Jesus did perform miracles.
But there's no contradictions with those. So those follow the lines of logic. God's nature still has to be logical because it's part of his nature. His ontology is logic.
So there we have it. He lays it clearly out. Part of God's nature, not part of the material world and physical laws, but necessarily, but part of God's nature itself is logical.
So my
Like,
point
God,
is,
you're saying God can make a burrito that's so big he can't eat it?
of course,
What? That's incoherent. That's like
it's literally not.
it is. It's totally. That's literally the definition of incoherence.
It's
Totally incoherent.
Literally not. I'm going to explain.
How
it
is
for
it
you.
not? Okay, go ahead.
So I can use an example like programming, for instance.
Okay.
I can program a video game in which I have absolute authority over the whole thing. I can change the rules at any moment. Within the confines of this game, I can create a rock that my avatar cannot move.
Sure.
I can program it so that my mouse can't move it
grant it.
until I go into the BIOS.
And you
change
both
it.
program the video game and not program the video game?
Yes. What do you mean?
What? How do?
See here, Tim Pool is he's kind of missing the point a little bit that Andrew is trying to get at. Andrew's trying to assert that there are some logical consistencies that have to remain true. And Tim Pool's not really listening at this point.
So you can make a video game that you never made.
What are you trying to say?
Can you make a video game that you never made?
Yes.
What?
What do you mean? I've made.
That's direct
I literally can
contradiction.
only make games I've never made. I don't make the same game twice.
No.
See, he's totally missing the point here. Andrew's not saying, can you make a game that you never made before? He's saying, can it be simultaneously true that you made this video game and you also did not make this video game? To show that there has to be logical consistency. It's part of the nature of existence itself.
And you
Less
both
of the
make a
sequel.
game while at the same time you're not making the game.
But I don't
Can
understand.
the game exist and at the same time not exist?
There is a reality where, yes, quite literally, it's called the paradox. Paradoxes are things that exist within the confines of our logical.
No, that's a
reality.
contradiction. A paradox is different than a contradiction. Tim, you cannot both be me and you. You can only be you.
You don't know that.
Well, yeah, I do, because it would violate the law of non-contradiction.
So this is where I feel like you're running into a problem. You
Okay.
think you know God.
No, I only understand that God has to have a nature, an ontological nature.
And
like
you don't
everything.
and what you think you know of God,
God
is
tells us his
looking
nature.
looking through a keyhole through a 800 bedroom
It's
mansion.
just based on what God tells us his nature is.
So, this is why I wanted to make a video on this, because I believe Andrew Wilson is making the more mature points, but we cannot throw out Tim Pool's idea where he's saying that, well, God by definition is going to be far beyond anything we can comprehend, and therefore he's just knee-jerk rejecting any implication that God has any limits whatsoever. Any sentence that Andrew or anybody says when it says God cannot do X, Tim Pool is going to automatically reject it. And that's why it seems like Tim Pool is not quite understanding Andrew very much, because he's not listening beyond that point. He's hearing Andrew say, you know, God cannot create a boulder that he himself could not lift. God could not create a burrito he himself could not eat. And he's just hearing God cannot. And he's like, no, we can't say that. Because that's going against, in his view, that's going against the nature of God to say there's anything that he cannot do. Andrew's trying to point out, like, definitionally is what he's trying to point out. Definitionally, God is all powerful, so he cannot create something more powerful than himself, because it would violate the very definition of God. And then what does this word God, what is it referring to at this point, right? If we're referring to God, the all-powerful being, and that all-powerful being creates a God that's more powerful than himself, the next time I say God, who am I referring to now? Because the first God is no longer the all-powerful being, right? So there's this definitional consistency that he's trying to hammer home to Tim Pool here.
Yes, and God can't. You can't comprehend higher dimensions. It's
Yeah,
physically
this
impossible.
is an energy. What you're talking about is what's called an essence energy distinction.
So yes, Tim Pool is nailing something on the head, where he's saying that we cannot comprehend higher dimensions because our very mind is a part of the third dimension, which involves time and space, and because that is its nature, it is unable to perceive or understand the fourth or any higher dimension of existence than that. But what Andrew is saying, au contraire to this point, is that logic itself is not a third dimension attribute. Logic itself is an attribute of God's nature. It permeates all dimensions, right? Something that comes up later, I don't know if we're going to get to it, I'll just quickly go over it, is that Andrew is an Orthodox Christian, so he's coming from a perspective based on Scripture, but very logically thought out, because he is a debater. He's been doing this for years. He's thought out all the philosophical problems. Tim Pool is not religious, but he believes in God. And later he does a nice diatribe, I don't know if I'm going to include it in this video, about how science and physics are analyzing the nature of the way reality and entropy and something like this, and therefore it very much necessitates a conscious creator being. Like consciousness is a fundamental necessity of reality, something like that, judged by scientific discovery, right? I don't know if we're going to get into that, but just to give you an idea of where they're coming from, slightly different positions, although they both believe in God. Now let's see what Andrew's point he's making here. I kind of forgot what he was saying as I went on my own little diatribe here, but let's see what he says.
agree with you that I can only participate in the energy of God,
I
but I cannot understand the essence of God. That I agree with.
don't think you're a Christian.
Okay.
So yeah, this part I might skip because Tim Pool. Well, let's just watch it. Why not make a little bit longer video, have a little fun with it? Let's see what he's going to call. Let's see the logic here. Tim Pool accuses Andrew of not being a Christian.
You
What?
There's a simple question.
This is Catholic dogma, Tim. I don't think you're a Christian because you're disagreeing with
not.
me on the nature of the.
Can
you're not?
God create a boulder so heavy that he himself cannot lift it?
No.
God exists outside of the confines of this logic in which you think you exist. God is so far beyond you, you cannot comprehend this. To ask if God can lift a rock is asking like, it's a stupid question because we are one tetragillionth of the universe, and you are presupposing God lives in your rules. That is reductivist, earthly, one-dimensional thinking.
Yeah, so you're saying there's universes where there could be contradictions?
I'm saying
could I interject here with a question on the nature of God for Tim? Tim, do you think that God could be, instead of a supreme good, supreme evil?
All right, I'm gonna pause this recording and we'll get back on track here because this is starting to drift. All right, here's a good summing up point here. I only had to skip ahead a little bit actually.
Okay.
To
and can
assert
exist in
that,
contradiction?
because contradiction exists only within our reality.
So you see, this is what Tim Pool is. This is his axiom that he's fixating on. Anytime Andrew says no because contradiction, no because contradiction, Tim Pool is saying contradictions only exist in our limited reality. And we're going to get into this later because this is actually a very good point. It's a very good point, and it ties in a lot with the Vedic perspective that I want to share with you.
No.
You cannot comprehend what exists outside of the
Literally, the laws of logic do not actually exist physically in our reality. They're transcendental. They're transcendental categories. They govern our reality, but
I don't
they don't
think you're
exist.
Christian.
Okay, what? Well, this is all.
You're saying
this is
God
all Christian
has
dogma.
to follow these rules. Period.
No, I'm saying that God has a nature like Tim has a nature. Like, for instance, okay, your nature as Tim, the things that make up you. You have a heart and you have lungs and you have things like this, and your heart and your lungs and things like this do work inside of your body that assist your body in moving and functioning and this and that. They're part of what you are. To take all of those things out would change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So this example is a really bad example because it is material. And the problem of defining what a person is is one of the... There are a few big contention points in philosophy. Defining what a person is one of those points of contention. So it's very difficult to think of a proper analogy. Although I would have gone for personality traits or some other identifiers than organs. But Andrew's point that he's making is like is akin to what I was saying earlier about how God is by nature X or A, B, C, and D, right? And then let's say A being all powerful. If God creates something more powerful than himself, now he is no longer all powerful, and therefore he is no longer God, because God is definitionally the all powerful, right? So we're running into these contradictions. Tim Pool was saying our minds can't conceive of these contradictions and how they could simultaneously be true in another reality. And that's actually where I want to step in and share the reconciliation, hence the title, The Harmonist of this channel, the reconciliation of these two viewpoints. But before I do, let's just finish it out, and so then I can move on to sharing that.
Okay? This is the same thing with God. We're just saying that there's a part of God's nature which he has shared with us as part of his nature.
Only part.
As the Logos. The Logos, part of it is logic.
Only part.
Yes, of course, only part. But if Tim Pool is conceding that logic is actually a part of that divine nature, Andrew has technically won the quote-unquote argument. Although I don't feel like they've really hit it home.
Yeah, but that would mean that part of God's nature is to not violate logic.
Did God create this universe, or is this universe just a function of God?
God created the universe.
So God could change the rules?
Well, no, that would be illogical.
God could not change the rules of the universe.
No, it would go contrary to... So it's like, what you're asking me is this. What would it be like if fire wasn't hot? Well, now we've changed the fundamental reality of what fire is.
So I'll simplify it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe our reality, first of all, what we think we know in science, there are higher dimensions we can't perceive. This implies, as most scientific discoveries in the last 130 years, if we choose to believe them, for instance, the electromagnetic spectrum, humans, or air is my favorite example. Humans did not know that air existed because they couldn't perceive it until there was this guy who was showering who realized that there is matter in and all around us. There have been numerous instances where humans realize that things we can't perceive exists. Mm-hmm. And that is indicative of humans don't know nearly enough about the universe, and that we do know. The discovery of the charged electromagnetic spectrum revolutionized human thought because we didn't realize that what we touch, smell, see, and hear as reality is less than a millionth or a billionth of what reality actually is.
Or a trillionth or a zillionth. Who knows? Yeah.
And not understanding dark matter, we are a speck in a massive universe on the ass of a mosquito relative to what God is or could be. Humans saying, I know the nature of God is arrogance that defies the idea of what we know we are limited in thinking.
Now, this is very important for anyone who is, I want to say, spiritual or religious or believes in God to any extent, is to keep in mind that whatever we think we know about God is just a thought, right? Leave some space for potentiality of a relationship that's beyond the mind.
That is, the average person thinks infinity is a number.
Yeah, but that
Go to the average person.
that makes no sense because all the things that you're saying right now and attributes are trying to define the nature of God, even though you don't think you are. If you're saying, so for instance, if you say,
want to put God in a box, I'm saying God
no,
exists beyond our
it's the
comprehension.
opposite. So if you say God is so complex you can't understand it, you have actually given me criteria for the nature of God.
So this is why Andrew is one of the best debaters. He can always just pull the rug right out from under your feet. The very thing that Tim Pool is accusing Andrew of, Andrew is saying you're doing that same thing. You're saying that I cannot pretend to know the nature of God, right? And then Tim Pool saying because God is so infinite and expansive and unknowable. Well, Andrew's like, well, you literally just yourself define the nature of God. You said God is X, Y, Z. You're doing the same thing that I am.
If you say God is
That's
timeless,
the lack of knowledge.
Yeah, if you say God is timeless, you've given me criteria for the nature of God. If you say God exists in the 19th dimension, you have now expressed the nature of God. So what we're doing is the same exact thing. I'm expressing to you the biblical nature of God. What God expresses to us
You're making
is part of his
an atheist
nature.
argument to me.
It's not atheist.
So
It's the opposite. It's dogma.
atheists are the ones who argue to me that the universe is mathematical, logical, cold, and it is what it is. It is.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here, and I think we might be near the end. I'll see if there's something else. This argument that Tim Dillon's making here about him being an atheist is kind of a cheap straw man gotcha kind of thing, where he's saying, like, because you're saying God's not unlimited because he's subject to contradictions, you're basically saying God is nothing more than just this material universe, and which is entirely unfair. It's entirely unfair, but I find Tim Pool to be a little bit unfair often in his debates. Andrew, on the other hand, I find to be an absolute jerk, but usually pretty fair. All right, here we go. Andrew's going to clearly, succinctly explain his position.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that the laws of logic, right? The law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle are part of the nature of God. We know this because this is how God created everything and how God expressed to us he creates. So if that is the case, we can understand that that's part of God's nature. He will not defy his nature because it's his nature.
So here we have an interesting evolution in Andrew's trying to connect to Tim Pool on this. Before he was saying God cannot, and he even further on slips back into cannot a couple times. But he's changing to accommodate Tim's assertion that God is unlimited and omnipotent, like there's nothing he cannot do. He has so much potency by saying God will not violate his own nature.
Will not defy.
The nature of God, as you described it, is the universe.
No, it's not the universe. The universe had a creator.
Yes, and
that creator had to be uncreated.
And the universe is a part of God.
No, that's a Gnostic belief.
That's what you.
This is also where we in the Vedic tradition would disagree with Andrew here, but there are so many branches of Christianity, and Andrew's familiar with all of them. He'd say that's a Gnostic belief. The Gnostics believe that the universe is a part of God, and this seems like a good place as any to step into sharing what I came here to share. I think we squeezed the lemon dry on this one. So to sum up, Tim Pool is saying God exists beyond all the material laws of this universe and contradictions. Nothing. He is unlimited. So a contradiction by nature would be a point of limitation. Say this cannot exist. A cannot both be A and not A, because that's a contradiction. And Tim Pool would say, doesn't matter. With God, A can be A and it can be not A. And Andrew is saying, no, the laws of nature are something more than this material universe. God follows the laws of logic, and he will not contradict them. And that does not mean that he is not all powerful. It's just his nature. It's hard to explain. It's hard for us to understand how God can be all powerful and still never be contradictory. And that's not a limit on him, right? So that's the summarization of their positions here. But what's interesting about that is in the Vedic tradition, we actually have God placing himself and others into illusion. Now, himself is a debatable category, but I'm going to try to explain what I mean by himself, but definitely placing others into illusion, and for a good reason. All right, so I'm an initiate in the tradition, the Vedic tradition called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, where it's what people know as the Hare Krishnas. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Used to be a household name, but now a lot of people no longer know what it is, right? But in that tradition, we call God Krishna. Now we believe that God is the one God of all religions. We believe in Christianity and, to Islam and all of the major religions as being given by God. But the unique speciality of why we call out the name Krishna, and we believe Krishna is the original form of that God, is because Krishna is existing, and this does pertain to the argument. I promise you, if you'll just stick with me for a minute here. Krishna is existing to taste what's called ras, which is transcendental ecstasies. Most conceptions of God is like an observer, like almost as if like we are the center of existence and God is up in the sky looking down upon us and enforcing rules and regulations and moral standards. And maybe one day we could get up to heaven if we are good, right? So everything's kind of based on morality, right? But to think that the supreme being, his primary existence is for us, is a bit, I'd like to say, immature. Just as like children, they think existence is revolving around them, and then when they grow up, they realize that it's not. I think similarly, uh, this is an error of a similar nature. And it's not so much an error, it's just an incomplete view because God is doing those things. But is that his ultimate or primary function? In reality, everything is existing for God, not the other way around. And God is existing to experience transcendental ecstasy, right? So this is a particular lila called Damodar lila. And Damodar, I believe, means to bind, right? And Krishna, this blue boy, is afraid of his mother because he has misbehaved and she is tying him up. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but she's got a rope in her hands and she's trying to tie him up, right? Let me quickly read the verse, translated verse that goes along with this picture. I worship that Damodar who, afraid of the stick in his mother's hand, cries and time and again rubs his eyes with both of his lotus hands, whose eyes express extreme fearfulness, whose sobbing makes the jeweled and pearl necklaces upon his neck marked with 3 lines shake, and whose belly is bound only by his mother's devotion. So God full of fear, right? That's would be kind of be another contradiction in God's nature. But it's part of our tradition. The highest place of existence where God is experiencing his most relishable transcendental ecstasies require these sorts of experiences. They require God to be afraid of his mother because there's such a flavor in that experience. And also the exchange of love that he can have with his mother when she doesn't know that he is God. And all of his friends who don't know that he is God. They can be more casual, more direct, and they can interact with him without being afraid. And a good example is, let's say there's a great businessman, right? He owns like a Fortune 500 whatever company, CEO, top dog, right? He's got all these varying degrees of relationship. And which ones does he like the most, right? The entire world sees him as this great stalwart figure who's like making money move. I make money move. And they all have this reverence for him, right? That might feel a little nice. Okay. Then there's the people he works with in his company. They see him as kind of like a godfather, right? He's the one who created and sustains the company through which they get their livelihood. And so they're appreciative and kind of in awe of him, right? That might be a little nice. There's the people at his company who he actually works with on a day-to-day basis, who develop a little bit more intimacy with him, right? They still call him Mr. So-and-so, but they might joke with him a little bit. They might ask him, how was your day today? He might ask them how their day was today. They're going to have a little bit more affection, a little bit more emotion in that relationship, and he with them as well, right? But still, this is not hitting quite the sweet spot for him in terms of what really he loves in life, right? So then there's after work, his son comes to his office from school, right? And his son wants to play. And so he's in the office and he's telling Daddy, please, I want to ride you like a horse. So Daddy gets down on all fours and his son is riding him around like a horse, laughing. And this tastes so much better than all the other relationships, all the fame, all the whatever he got, because it's more and more intimate. But if his son were to see him in the same way, the other people see him as this big power player, right, in the world, he would not, he would feel shy. He would be like, I can't sit on your back and ride you around like a horse, right? But his father would want that. He wants that, his son to feel that free with him, right? So God has these potencies. Andrew was talking about the energies of God. God has these potencies. One of them is called Mahamaya. If anyone's heard of the word Maya, it means illusion, right? And that's the energy that binds us into this world where we believe we are this physical body, and we believe all these dreams that we're experiencing are real, and we're suffering or enjoying, both ends, various temporal events that happen in this reality, right? Um, Anybody who wants to enjoy independently of God, which is natural for some, gets bound by this illusory energy. But he also, that's his external illusory energy that creates this material world and the material existence. He also has an internal energy, which even in that transcendental spiritual world, which is unending and infinite and outside of time and space as we know it, there is also an energy that creates illusion there. But unlike the external illusion energy, this yoga maya only is illusioning for the sake of increasing the ras, or increasing the pleasure of this ever increasing, ever expanding ocean of bliss that God and his various associates are relishing in every eternal moment. More and more and more ecstasy is flowing. And it does that by not letting Mother Yashoda here know that Krishna is God. It does that by Krishna, even though he is God, and I don't think Krishna ever forgets or is unaware of that. It could be kind of like when you're watching a movie, right? You know it's a movie, you know it's not real, but you get into it. You get into it. You cry when so and so dies. You laugh when this happens, right? And if anybody were to tap your shoulder and be like, "Hey, calm down," you'd be like, "It's all right. Like I know what's happening here." But when you're actually absorbed in the movie, there is no need to have any sense of awareness of that. So I believe God Himself. How do we reconcile this? God can create a boulder that he himself could not lift, but then again, God cannot because he's all powerful, right? Tim Pool's saying if God wants to create a boulder that he himself cannot lift, he can do it. If God wants to create a God that is more powerful than himself, he can do it. And Andrew's saying like no, because definitionally then it would violate the very definition of what God is. Well, in our tradition, God keeps his godhood, but he puts it aside for the sake of experiencing, let's just say, love, for the sake of experiencing love and ecstasy in ever increasing amounts. And this, I think, is the resolution there. It's the harmonization. God can, if he wants, make a boulder that he cannot lift, as so it seems. He can, because the point of that for God is experiential. Anything God is creating is for the experience of that experience, right? So God can experience that experience, but he can never not be all powerful. And here's why. Here's why. Okay, so this is a book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is basically like the Bible for Hinduism, or Vedic, I like to say. culture, and it's very old. It's much older than the Christian Bible, but it goes hand in hand with it. And the Christian Bible, in the Christianity, God says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," right? Basically saying that He is everything. And similarly here, God is saying the same thing. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both its origin and its dissolution. There is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound and ether and ability in man. I am the fragrance of the earth. I am the heat and fire. I am the life of all that lives. I am the penance of all ascetics. I am the original seed of all existences, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the prowess of all powerful men. I am the strength of the strong, right? The point being that if God were to create a God who is more powerful than himself, he is that strength that God has, right? In our tradition, all, like it says right here, all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of this material nature. So God is everything. If he creates something, that is him or a part of him as well. So if God creates a God who is more powerful than himself, that thing is within him because God is everything. So is it more powerful than him if it's a part of him, right? So anyway, that might be a key difference between myself and, let's say, Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson rejects that the universe is a part of God. It's one of those things that I think is simultaneously true and not true. It's part of God's energies. God's energies are a part of God, right? So nothing exists outside of him. So could he create something that he could not lift? Ontologically, no. Is it ontologically or tautologically? I forget the proper word to use there, but no, because he can't create anything that is not actually a part of himself, right? But yes, he can, because if he wants to experience that experience, he can create that experience. And in fact, it's a huge part of our tradition that that God is creating transcendental illusions in order to experience everything we could possibly conceive of, and far, far more even than that. I'll have call to get into that later. This is just the first video of this channel, and I saw that debate. I wanted to comment on it and share the reconciliation. I don't think many people had considered God in this light as an entity who is experiencing transcendental bliss and everything is existing for that case. He does also he in the Vedic scriptures, he creates expansions of himself that manage things. Like his expansion Vishnu goes and manages the material energy, right? He's got numerous, let's say infinite expansions for all these sort of functions, but Krishna himself, he doesn't do any of that. He's just in his transcendental spiritual world experiencing ever increasing waves of ecstasy and bliss. And sometimes his his internal energy, not his external illusionary potency, which keeps all of us separate from God, but the internal one will create situations where he forgets his own godhood. Those who he's with forget his godhood in order that they can experience things like excitement and fear, things that knowledge of God's godhood would get in the way of. If you know you're with God and he is God, what cause is there to ever be afraid of anything? If you know you're with God and he is God, even though you love him so much, the nature of that relationship is going to be limited by this awe and reverence, right? So he has this illusionary potency that makes these seemingly contradictory situations, like God being unable to lift a boulder, happen. And then when his mother was trying to tie him in that picture that I showed you, let me see if I can find it again. When his mother was trying to tie him, she couldn't. Her rope was 2 inches too short, they say, and then so she stopped and she went and got some hair ties. She tied them onto the rope, went back, and it was still 2 inches too short. She went to all the other ladies in their cowherd village, and she got all their hair ties, and she tied them on. She had like this super long cord. She goes to tie him up. It's still 2 inches too short because God cannot be bound. But she's so she loves him so much, and she's just so like, I'm just gonna keep trying. because he needs to learn, right? And when God saw her devotion and her and the power of that love, he had to surrender to it. It conquered him, and he allowed himself to be bound by her. So, yes, could God create a boulder he cannot lift? Yes, but why? Right? Why? He's got to have a good reason. He's got to want it. He has to want it. God's desire is the source of him doing anything, as it is with all of us, right? Our desires are the source of all of our activities. Why would God create a boulder that he cannot lift? Um, I would say anything God conceives of, it instantly it becomes a reality that he tastes. Instantly. So Tim Pool is right. We cannot say God cannot do it. But Andrew is also right that God will never violate the laws of logic. And that is the reconciliation which is, I think, very beautiful that is offered by the proper understanding of the Vedic scriptures of India as found in the also monotheistic religion of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, commonly known as the Hare Krishnas. As this channel progresses, I plan to share other points where I have an interesting thought or something to share that I feel like people had never thought of before that they might appreciate. I'm not going to be just proselytizing on this channel. There's already enough of that out there. I'm just going to be sharing what I consider to be very interesting little nuggets as they come up in my experience of consuming social media content. Right now, I happen to be a big Andrew Wilson fan. I think he's great. He is sometimes unnecessarily mean, but I'm going to be honest. I love that about him as well. I crack up. I crack up watching him. But if you watch him enough, at first you might find him to be a little mean. But if you watch closely, even against people who are the most bad faith, he goes above and beyond to try to connect with them and get them to hear the point where they're disconnecting from logic so they can understand. But usually they're too emotionally charged at that point to hear what he's saying. And but he doesn't just look for slam dunk opportunities. He makes an effort to get through when someone's off on their rocker. He makes an effort to help them be like, hey, wait, think about it for a second. Think about what you're saying. Think about what I'm saying. He does a good job. Tim Pool is I don't watch him regularly. I only see him through his interactions with Andrew Wilson. I've only been into Andrew Wilson for a couple months now, and I'm just running out of stuff to watch, guys. But it's probably good. Anyway, please stay tuned, subscribe. These videos might not be very often. I'm a very busy person, but I'll see you in the next one. Hare Krishna.